Okay, so you took a digger and your front wheel is pointed that way when your bars are pointed straight. I don't know if you can see that well here on camera, but my front tire and my front fender are not pointed the same direction. And that's because my bars / my front end is all tweaked. And I did take a digger. See this? I've got a little bit of road rash still left here. There's a massive bruise right here on this. My hand is barely coming back into usefulness. And this helmet, holy smacker. Wipe the visor off and I hit my head as hard as I've ever hit it. Got a mild concussion, don't remember how it happened, and my son was too far behind me to actually see it. But now what we need to do is straighten up this bike. A lot of times you haven't even bent anything. My bars are not bent, but I'm going to show you how to straighten up the wheel, get the forks and everything back into alignment, get your handlebars back into alignment, and check everything. I'm often surprised at the types of crashes that will keep your front wheel straight, where it's not out of alignment, and then other times you just have a little tip over and the thing will go completely out of whack. In this case, I actually haven't crashed this hard in probably 10 years. But luckily, the only thing that happened to the bike is I've kind of scuffed up my handguard right here, and then the bike is a little bit out of alignment. But it's really easy to kind of correct this. And here's how I do it. You can do this, and you can do versions of it. I see people hitting, like slamming their front tire against something to kind of get it back in alignment if you need to do it just fast, like out on the trail. But an easy thing to do to correct this problem is to loosen these pinch bolts down here on the bottom. Probably should have used a ratchet for that because the tire's in the way, but I'm going to loosen this pinch bolt. And what that allows is it allows this front fork here, this one, to kind of move side to side. And then I'm going to loosen the bottom pinch bolts here. Hopefully we're still in the frame. Loosen the bottom pinch bolts on the bottom of the triple clamps. I'm going to do that on both sides because essentially what happens is these forks have gotten out of alignment and they're twisted up, right? So everything's kind of twisted. So I'm gonna have those things loose. And then the next thing we're gonna do, make sure they're loose, we're gonna take the bike, and it's, in fact, just doing that has gotten this, the front fender is what I'm kind of looking at. Just doing that has gotten this mostly back in alignment. But at this point, I'm just gonna take the bike off the stand and compress this front suspension. Let me show you that. Hey, super quick, before we get too deep into this video, just know that this will be a sweepstakes bike in September 15th to October 15th. And if you want to support these videos anytime, use the link to Rocky Mountain ATV. They're down in the video description and they're on my website, dirtbikechannel.com. Just click on the link, shop Rocky Mountain ATV, and then buy anything as normal. It won't cost you, I was about to say it doesn't cost you a dime. It won't cost you anything, but it does help to support these videos. So use the links down in the video description or on dirtbikechannel.com. Thanks. Okay, now with those things loose, I can just go like this and give the bike a couple of good pumps by holding the front brake. And usually everything will come back into alignment. Then I'm gonna take a look at this, and we're pretty much back in alignment. The other thing I'm gonna do right now on this, and then at this point, I could tighten these lower pinch bolts and tighten these pinch bolts here, and we'd be good. In this case, I'm actually going to loosen my top triple clamps and just make sure everything is back into a spot where it's still aligned. Because I can feel there's a little bit, okay, finally I got a little play down here where this is moving. So I may have a little bit more of a tweak up here. I feel like this one could use a little bit more straightening out because I just feel like it's still a little bit on a bind. So I'm loosening top triple clamps. I'm gonna do that on both sides. Make sure these are all loose. So now all of the bolts on this front end are loose, and yep, this fork is gonna drop down. But now that everything is loose, it can all get into a spot where it's fine again, okay? And that's what I want. So everything has to be, whatever energy I put into this, it's all out now because we can move these forks up and down. So now I'm gonna put my fork height back to exactly where I want it and then re-torque everything down. There's something else I like to do when I'm actually readjusting my fork height and making sure all of this stuff stays in alignment. And that is, I'll take my front wheel off and then I'll put my axle back in. And this axle, if the forks are the same height and in proper alignment, this axle will spin freely. It is not spinning freely right now, and that's because there is a bind. I think these forks are not at the same height. And of course they're not, because they're not even tight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pick a mark, which is one of these markings on my forks that it was at. I'm gonna get it, eyeball it just to where I think it's right. And we could use calipers, we could use a lot of different things, but I'm also, without calipers, I'm going to show you how you can make sure that that is pretty darn close just by using this axle trick. Okay, so I'm gonna pick this. I want this bike to be actually quite nimble. And so I'm gonna run the forks up, forks at this second line right here. I'm gonna make sure it's pointed forward again, but I want it to be about there on that second line. And I'm just going to tighten this just down just a smidge, just to get my up and down. Now you could I'm tightening this top clamp. You could tighten the lower clamp. I don't know that it really matters, but I'm going to do then the same thing over here, because this is just gonna get me kind of like a gauge for where I wanna be. Now I've got that about where I think it should be. I'm just gonna tighten that just a smidge. Now we're gonna go down to the bottom and check this. Okay, now with those forks pretty much at the same height up on the top, we should be able to put this in, and then notice this will just spin freely. It wouldn't spin before because the forks were bound up. But now with that there like that, I know that things are good. And I'm gonna go up and now actually put a torque wrench on those triple clamp bolts up top. Okay, I'm gonna start with the bottom mounts. And now a lot of these forks some of these will have an actual rating right on them. This one goes to 12 Newton meters, so I'm going to adjust my wrench down to 12 Newton meters. My torque wrench, there we go, let that set. So a lot of times these will require a little bit less torque than the top ones. On this particular KTM, it does. So we're gonna go with 12 Newton meters on the bottom. So we'll just get that there. And I like to alternate between the two because it does affect. There we go, there's 12, almost 12. That's it, and I'll do it on the other side. But this is about the only place, I mean, I know there's a lot of other places that have a torque spec, and it's not a bad idea to torque bolts on your bike, but this is about the only place that I'm really kind of anal about it, is on my forks. And I do think this is important here, especially where they're talking about it right on the fork. It's printed right here and right here, or on those clamps, so I know it's important. Okay, so another thing that can kind of happen is that your mounts, in your handlebar mounts, can actually get kind of out of whack, especially on some of these KTM ones. They'll have a rubber handlebar mounts to reduce vibration and to reduce shock, and I can tell this is out of alignment here just by looking at it, just a little bit. I don't think my bars are bent. I think it's just the mount that's out of alignment. So I'm going to loosen these bottom mounts right here, and I believe this is gonna be, oh, that's a Torx. So this is just a Torx on this bike. So I'll get a Torx bit, loosen that, and I'm gonna do that with my handlebars still on. Then I'm going to kind of pull this all apart and get them straightened back up. I like to do this part with the handlebars still on because you can kind of use the handlebar as leverage. And this isn't, like I was saying, this, you don't always have to do all of this stuff, but in this case, we kind of got everything out of whack. And so we'll just take this stuff apart. Just because we're going the full Monty here, I've taken the handlebar mount out. See, this is the top rubber piece that goes down in here. And then this is the piece that goes up from the bottom, and it just kind of pops up through the top like that. And then you have that nut, or the bolt that goes up through the bottom. So I just wanted to take all this apart, and you kind of have to wiggle this stuff out with a screwdriver from the bottom. But I'm just making sure that all of this stuff is now not on a bind anymore. I'll put this, I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side, and I'll put this all back together so it's nice and flush and everything looks perfectly. Because these little mounts can get kind of on a bind because of that rubber, and then your handlebars are not straight. and you're frustrated. So take everything apart is what I've found, and then put it all back together and you're good to go. Okay, so I want to show you the front wheel procedure to make sure that your forks stay in alignment and there's no bind. So I've tightened one of these pinch bolts on this side. I only do one, and I'll show you why in just a second. I'm gonna tighten these things. Am I in the right place? I'm gonna tighten my pinch bolts on this side for the axle, tighten these things down. They were really loose. There is a torque spec for those, and I'm doing it exactly to torque spec on my wrist here. Okay, now that that's tight, I'm gonna go ahead and just tighten down my axle bolt here. We had that almost done, but I'll tighten these first, then I'll tighten that. Now I'm gonna come to the other side here. Let me bring the camera to the other side. And make sure we're still kind of in the frame here. And then we're in focus. Okay, so now I'm going to loosen this one pinch bolt here, because we want this fork to freely float, okay? So now these pinch bolts are loose, and if I get everything here in alignment, what I'm looking for is we want this fork to be straight up and down, and it's supposed to be able to float on this axle here. It's really hard to show you with this on. I'll pull this off so we can see that. I'll have to put that on again. But this axle can float right here. I don't know how well you can see it, but like I can move it one side to the next, one side to the other. So that can float, see that? We want that to be in the very most straight up and down position. There's a couple different ways we can do it. We can either bang the bars, like hit the bars like that, or another way, another method. I'm gonna pump up my front brake, so I've got front brake again. Another method is we can spin the wheel and then stop it. Spin the wheel, stop it. And that gives us the most natural point for this fork to then be pinched down onto this axle. And I know it's the case because I can kind of bind this over like this. I'm gonna bind it over and then watch what happens. I go like that and I spin the wheel and stop it real fast, and it goes back to this natural spot. And sometimes I'll do it just a couple times just to make sure that it always comes back to that one spot. And I can see, especially, yep, see now it's back to that natural spot, and it's all in its exact spot that it wants to be at. Now I'm going to put these bolts back in and tighten this down. Tighten these pinch bolts, and that way everything is going to maintain in perfect alignment. So to recap, if your front end is out of alignment on a KTM, the easiest thing you can do is loosen these pinch bolts. On some of the other bikes, you might want to loosen the axle bolt, but on a KTM, just loosen the pinch bolts on the right-hand side, loosen your triple clamp bolts on the bottom, and then you can usually just use the front brake and compress the suspension, and things will untweak themselves. That's usually, and then you could just tighten these back in on the trail. Of course, you want to be careful not to over tighten them if you don't have a torque wrench, but that will usually get you by. Then you tighten up those bottom triple clamp bolts, tighten up this pinch bolt back down here, and you should be good to go. Other things you can do, if you think things are completely out of alignment and you want to redo everything, you can kind of do the whole thing. Take all the bolts, loosen all the bolts on the triple clamps, both sides, have this off, even take the wheel off, and just kind of get everything back into perfect alignment, which is what I did here. And I also had to do my steering mounts on this particular one to get everything back to flush and back to where nothing is bound. The bike is good to go. It's amazing how strong these bikes are. I did get a concussion on this. I whacked my head so hard. This Fly Formula helmet is now toast because I hit my head so hard I don't remember it. It was bad. Right into a rock. And so I'm glad that I had all my safety gear on, and all I ended up with is a sore hand from going down, probably just whacking the ground. This hand is sore, a little bit of skin off that, a little bit of skin off here under my jersey, and then a big bruise down here and a sore head. So I haven't ridden for a week or so, a week and a half now. And I'm gonna take a full 2 weeks off the bike before I get back on, because I get a new helmet too. I have some older helmets I can still use. But yeah, took a digger. It's the second time in 10 years I've had a concussion, and don't remember exactly how it happened. So, but that's part of riding dirt bikes. I've been really blessed to not get very hurt. And this was just one where I did really take a dirt sample and a rock sample with my head and my hip and my arm. So the bike's back to perfect working order now, and she's good to go. I mean, I didn't even bend the pipe. Like that's how, there's not a scratch on the bike except for these scratches right here. It's pretty crazy. This is a sweepstakes bike that you can win starting October 15th. I mean, starting September 15th until October 15th. So it'll go for 1 month. So stay tuned for my website, dirtbikechannel.com, for that. You can always use the links to Rocky Mountain ATV. They're down in the video description, or they're on my website, dirtbikechannel.com. That's what helps keeps these videos going, is when you click on those links. After you click on my link for Rocky Mountain ATV, you can buy anything they sell, and it helps to support what we're doing. So I really love that way to support, because it doesn't cost you anything. And Rocky Mountain ATV has been a fantastic partner through the years. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful for you guys to be able to get your bike back in alignment. And until next time, leave a single track. Thanks.